Guys, we're currently in Tamworth, a place called Wigginton, and this place right here is where a girl called Judith Roberts got found. Unsolved mystery or unsolved murder, this one. Absolutely baffling, mate. Apparently, people seem to think it was Peter Sutcliffe that done it. Do you know the Ripper from up Yorkshire? Check this out as well. There was a guy that was stationed at Wigginton Barracks just down the road. He's admitted to the murder because he had a dream and seen the girl's face in his dream. Absolutely baffling, mate. Ended up doing 20 years for it. There was absolutely no evidence that he'd done it, apart from his account of this dream. A fucking weirdo, man. Anyway, it's unsolved. It's from 1972, if I remember right. And it's bloody baffling, mate. So, let's get into it, guys. Guys, while I remember as well, I keep getting asked to do the story. Now, obviously, I'm in Wigginton. We all know what happened near Wigginton a couple of years ago. I keep getting asked to cover that story, and it's not going to happen, guys. That family's going to be struggling enough without having me bloody commentating about it on the internet. Do you know what I mean? I just don't want to be that. I don't want to be that fucking ghoul on the internet that does stuff like that. But if the family do see this video, I'd love to put something together for Keely. I really would. But without being approached by them, there's no way on earth I'm approaching them. It's just not who I am, do you know what I mean? But like I say, if the family do see this video, then just know, just because I'm not talking about it doesn't mean that I don't think about Keely quite a lot. It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. But yeah, anyway, Judith Roberts, let's get into it, guys.
You're about to hear a case that even now doesn't sit right with the people who remember it, and doesn't sit right with those who have gone back through it carefully years later. This isn't just a story of a murder, and it isn't just a story of a conviction. It's a story of how a 14-year-old girl lost her life on a bike ride, how a teenager was convicted largely on the strength of his own words, and how decades later serious doubts would begin to unravel. On June the 7th, 1972, Judith Roberts, just 14 years old, had a disagreement with the parents. The kind of argument that happens in countless of homes and is usually forgotten about the day after. This time it was over something as simple as wearing makeup. But like many teenagers would, Judith reacted in the moment, storming out the house in frustration, getting on a bike and riding off into the sunset. As the hours passed and she still hadn't returned, concern quickly turned into fear, and what began as a missing person search soon became something much larger. With hundreds of people, including police officers, army trainees from the barracks and local residents combing their way through the surrounding areas over the course of the next 3 days, hoping to find some trace of where she'd gone or what might have happened to her. Then on the Saturday, the search came to a devastating conclusion when Judith was found in a field just off what locals referred to as Lover's Lane, Comerford Lane near Wigginton, where her body had been left battered and partially concealed beneath fertiliser sacks, with the green bicycle left just 16 feet away hidden in the bush. A small detail that only added to the sense that something sudden and violent had taken place. Beyond that, there was very little to go on, no clear suspect and no obvious weapon, and nothing else that immediately pointed investigators in a definitive direction. In the days that followed, police carried out extensive searches of the surrounding land, cutting through hay in neighbouring fields and sweeping the area with metal detectors in an effort to uncover anything that might have been missed. And at one point, when asked whether the murder weapon had been found, Detective Chief Superintendent Harold Roy gave a measured and cautious reply, saying only that they may have done. A statement that raised as many questions as it answered. At the time, officers were stopping vehicles passing through the area and asking drivers where they'd been in the previous week, trying to build a clearer picture of who might have been in the vicinity on the night Judith was killed, while appeals were made to the public in the hope that someone might come forward with information, no matter how small it seemed. At the same time, officers were stopping vehicles passing through the area asking drivers where they'd been in the previous week, trying to build a clearer picture of who might have been in the vicinity of the area on the night that Judith was killed, while appeals were also made to the public in the hope that someone might come forward with information, no matter how small it seemed. Just over a week later, in a move that today would be almost unthinkable, Judith's twin sister Anne took part in a reconstruction of her sister's final journey. She was wearing identical clothing and riding the same bicycle as she retraced the route from the home at 155 Gilway, through Wigginton Road and the surrounding lanes, before eventually arriving at Comerford Lane, the same stretch where Judith's body had been discovered only days earlier, a moment that brought the reality of what had happened into even sharper focus for those watching. After the reconstruction, Anne refused to speak to reporters, simply stating that she'd been told not to talk to anyone, while her father stood nearby leaning on a car, close to the location where his daughter had been found, as photographers documented the scene in the hope that it might prompt new leads. Weeks passed and police continued to appeal for witnesses, including a specific request to identify a young girl and a well-built man who had been seen talking near the entrance of Comerford Lane in the evening of the murder. Individuals who were not considered suspects but who had never been identified and were believed to potentially hold important information. By late August, the investigation stretched beyond the local area, with officers travelling to the north of England to follow up on new leads. Yet despite these efforts, no clear breakthrough had been made. All of a sudden, in the October of 1972, the direction of the case changed dramatically, when 17-year-old Andrew James Evans was arrested and accused of Judith's murder. Evans, who had been a soldier stationed at Wigginton Barracks near Lichfield before being discharged on medical grounds the day after Judith's death, had moved to Longton to live with his grandmother, having previously grown up in Burton-on-Trent where he attended school and worked a series of jobs before joining the army. What placed Evans at the centre of the case was not physical evidence, but his own confession. After going to Longton Police Station and asking to see a photograph of Judith, Evans went on to admit the murder, later claiming that he'd seen a face in a dream. And following 3 days of interviews, he signed a statement in which he maintained his guilt, stating that he was guilty of the crime. There were inconsistencies in his account, including claims that he'd been with 3 other men in the barracks at the time. Now, 2 of these men that he stated he was with had previously returned home, and one of the names that he gave didn't exist at all. And despite all this, it was the confession itself that remained the foundation of the case against him. During interviews, it was reported that when his mother entered the room, Evans told her, "It's no good, Mum, I've done it. I don't know what made me do it," before adding that he had no feelings for the girl and it was his mother that he felt sorry for. And when he was formally charged, he is said to have replied simply, "Yes, I did it." However, Evans later retracted that confession. Despite this, in 1973, Evans was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. And for many years, that appeared to be the conclusion of the case. But the doubts never fully went away, because when this case was looked at more closely, one fact stood out more than anything else. It was that the conviction rested almost entirely on a confession that had later been withdrawn, with no strong physical evidence putting Evans at the scene. Those doubts grew over time, and more than 2 decades later, they finally led to a breakthrough when Evans contacted the organisation called Justice, a charity that investigates potential miscarriages of justice, leading to the case being re-examined in detail. At this time, Evans was banged up in Sudbury Prison, a Cat C prison and one that readied criminals for the outside world. Evans was also already being granted leave. In 1997, his conviction was overturned, and Andrew Evans was released after spending decades in prison for a crime that courts could no longer safely say that he committed. Later, he received substantial compensation, although by that point, the years that he'd lost could never be returned. I can't help but think that it's his own fault for admitting to a crime that he now says he didn't do. And this is where the case becomes even more unsettling, because once the conviction was overturned, it left behind a question that still hasn't been answered. If numbnuts Andrew Evans didn't kill Judith Roberts, then who did? Over time, various theories have been put forward, including suggestions that Judith may have been the victim of Peter Sutcliffe, the shithouse who would later become known as the Yorkshire Ripper, with some claiming that she could be one of the several uncounted victims linked to him. However, when you examine that theory more closely, it becomes difficult to support with any real certainty, as it would have meant that Sutcliffe would have had to travel over 500 miles on the day that Judith Roberts was killed, and then turning up to work for a 10-hour shift, while somehow diverting to commit a completely opportunistic killing without leaving any trace behind. While that makes it technically possible, it raises serious questions about how likely it really is, particularly given that there's never been any confirmed evidence placing him anywhere near the scene. Just not realistic. And so, despite everything that's been uncovered over the years, the case remains unresolved. A young girl who never got home, a conviction that possibly shouldn't have happened, and a question that even now still hasn't been answered. So rest in peace, Judith Roberts.